The rifle cracked. A single shot that echoed through Tombstone's dusty streets. Smoke rose from the barrel. Silas Crane's men froze. The old man slumped to the ground. Arabella screamed again. "That paper isn't real!" Her voice raw with desperation. The men ignored her. They dragged the father toward a waiting wagon, his boots scraping against the wooden porch, his face streaked with dust and tears, the family's future hanging by a thread, a single piece of paper that could save them or destroy them. The sun had barely risen over Tombstone when the trouble began. Not with a bang, but with the creak of wheels on unpaved streets. 6 men on horseback, led by Silas Crane, a man whose name was whispered in saloons and shops with equal parts fear and contempt. They rode straight for the Blackwood property, not a house, but a sprawling homestead that had been in Arabella's family for 3 generations. Arabella stood at the window, her knuckles white on the windowsill. She knew what this meant. The letter had arrived yesterday, a summons to the bank, a demand to produce documents that had been in her family's possession for decades, documents that proved beyond any doubt that the land belonged to them. But those documents were gone, vanished. And now Silas Crane and his men were here to collect. "Where is it?" Silas's voice boomed as he dismounted. His men fanned out, surrounding the house, their hands resting on holsters, their eyes scanning every window, every door. Arabella's father, a man whose hands were gnarled from decades of work but still steady, stepped onto the porch. "There's nothing here for you, Silas. This land belongs to my family. Always has, always will." Silas laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Belongs? Your family couldn't pay the taxes on this land if you sold every cow and every crop. The bank owns it now, and I represent the bank." Arabella's heart pounded. She rushed to the door, but her father held up a hand. "Stay back." She obeyed. Her breath caught in her throat. The men moved forward, not with guns drawn, but with an air of grim purpose. They climbed the porch steps. 2 men grabbed her father's arms. His face paled, his shoulders slumped, not in fear but in defeat. Arabella couldn't stay silent. "That paper isn't real!" she screamed. The words tore from her throat. "You forged it! Everyone knows you forged it!" Silas turned. His eyes narrowed. "Is that what you think, little girl? That the law is on your side?" He gestured to his men. "Search the house. Find whatever papers they have. Burn the rest." The men moved inside. Furniture crashed. Drawers were pulled out and emptied. Arabella's mother rushed from the kitchen, her apron covered in flour. "Stop this madness!" she cried. "You can't just—" A man backhanded her, not hard enough to knock her down, but hard enough to silence her. She crumpled to the floor, a hand pressed to her cheek. Arabella's father struggled against his captors, his face red with rage. "Leave my mother alone!" Arabella shouted. She took a step forward, but another man blocked her path, his hand on the butt of his pistol. Silas ignored the commotion. He walked toward Arabella, his shadow falling over her. "You think you're clever. You think you're special." He leaned close. His breath smelled of whiskey and something else, something sour. "Your father couldn't protect you. Your mother can't protect you, and no one else in this town will lift a finger to help you." He straightened up. "Find it," he ordered his men. "Find that document, or burn this place to the ground with them in it." The men continued their search. More crashes, more shouts. Arabella's father was dragged toward the waiting wagon, his boots scraping against the wooden steps, his face streaked with dust and tears. Arabella screamed again. "That paper isn't real!" Her voice raw with desperation. The men ignored her. They threw her father into the back of the wagon. He landed hard. The wagon creaked under his weight. Silas mounted his horse. "This isn't over," he said, his eyes fixed on Arabella. "Not by a long shot." He turned his horse. The other men followed. They rode out of the yard, leaving behind a scene of destruction and despair. Arabella rushed to her mother, who was slowly getting to her feet, her cheek already beginning to bruise. "We have to do something," Arabella whispered. "They'll kill him, or worse." Her mother shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "There's nothing we can do. Silas Crane runs this town. The sheriff's in his pocket. The judge is his friend. Who would help us?" Arabella looked at the house, at the broken furniture, at the scattered papers, at the life that had been torn apart in minutes. She thought of the document, the real document, the one that would prove they owned the land, the one that had been in their family for generations, the one that had disappeared days ago. "We have to find it," Arabella said, her voice stronger now, determined. "Before they do." But where could it be? Who had taken it, and how could they possibly get it back before Silas and his men destroyed everything they had left? Arabella stood frozen in the doorway, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The dust from her father's departure still hung in the air, mixing with the scent of broken furniture and her mother's silent tears. She looked at the scattered papers across the floor, their family's history strewn about like trash. Her mother slowly rose, her hand still pressed to her cheek where the man had struck her. "They'll be back, Arabella," she whispered. "Silas doesn't give up, not until he gets what he wants." Arabella knelt, gathering the papers. Most were worthless now. Receipts for supplies, letters from neighbors, old farming records. But one document remained, the one that mattered. The original land grant signed by the territorial governor himself. The document that proved beyond any doubt that the Blackwood family owned this land. "We have to find it," Arabella said, her voice trembling but resolute. "Before they do." Her mother shook her head. "It's gone, Arabella. Edgar Thorne took it yesterday, when your father went to confront him about the forged papers from the bank." Arabella's blood ran cold. Edgar Thorne, the town's most respected lawyer. A man who had handled the Blackwood family's legal matters for decades. A man they had trusted implicitly. "Why would he do this?" Arabella asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because Silas Crane paid him more than we ever could," her mother replied. "More than the land is worth. He promised Thorne a partnership in the new mining operation that will be built on our land once he takes it from us." Arabella looked out the window at the sprawling homestead that had been in her family for 3 generations. Her grandfather had homesteaded this land back in the 1860s, when the territory was still wild and untamed. He had built the house with his own hands, planted the first crops, dug the first well. Her father had expanded it, adding the barn, the chicken coop, the irrigation system that made the land so valuable. And now it would all be gone, all because of a single piece of paper. "The original grant is the only thing that can stop this," Arabella said, clutching the document in her hand. "The one with the governor's signature, the one that's been in our family vault since the day it was signed." Her mother nodded. "Silas knows that. That's why he sent his men to search for it. He knows it's not in the house. He knows we wouldn't be foolish enough to keep it here." "Then where is it?" Arabella asked, desperation creeping into her voice. Her mother's eyes filled with tears again. "I don't know, Arabella. I just don't know. But we have to find it before Silas does, before he destroys everything we've built." Arabella looked at the document in her hand. It was just paper, really, but on that paper was written the history of her family, the blood, sweat, and tears of 3 generations, the dreams of her grandfather, her father, and now herself. If Silas Crane got his hands on it, all of that would be gone. The land would be sold to mining interests, the house would be torn down, their name would be forgotten. Just another family swallowed by the greed of men like Silas Crane. "We have to leave," Arabella said suddenly, "before they come back, before they find us." Her mother nodded. "Where will we go?" "Doc Elmer's place," Arabella said. "He's been family friend for years. He might know what to do. He might have seen something." Arabella gathered what few belongings they could carry. The document, some food, a change of clothes. Her mother limped beside her, her cheek still throbbing. As they slipped out the back door, Arabella cast one last look at the home that had been in her family for so long. The home that would be lost if they couldn't find the document. The home that would be lost if they couldn't stop Silas Crane. The sun was beginning to set as they made their way through the dusty streets of Tombstone. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every sound made them jump. They walked quickly, heads down, trying not to draw attention to themselves. They reached Doc Elmer's small cabin on the edge of town. The doctor was a kind man with a gentle voice and steady hands. He had delivered Arabella. He had set her father's broken arm when he fell from a horse. He had been there for every milestone of her life. Arabella knocked on the door. It opened almost immediately. Doc Elmer's face registered surprise, then concern, as he saw their condition. "Arabella, Mrs. Blackwood, what happened? Are you hurt?" Arabella shook her head. "It's my father, Doc. Silas Crane took him. They're looking for the original land grant, the one with the governor's signature." Doc Elmer's face darkened. "I see. And you think I might know where it is?" Arabella nodded. "Please, Doc, you were there when my grandfather signed it. You witnessed it yourself. You must have some idea of where it could be." Doc Elmer sighed. "I do know something, but it's not good news. The document has been missing for days. Someone has been asking questions about it, asking people who might have seen it." Arabella's heart sank. "Who?" "I don't know for sure," Doc Elmer said, "but I have a suspicion, and it involves more than just Silas Crane. There are others involved, powerful people, people who don't want the truth to come out." Arabella looked at the document in her hand, the one that could save her family, the one that could stop Silas Crane, the one that was now more important than ever. "We have to find it," she said, her voice filled with determination. "Before they do, before it's too late." Doc Elmer nodded. "I'll help you, but we have to be careful. This goes deeper than any of us realized, much deeper." As the three of them stood in the fading light, Arabella knew their fight had just begun. The document was out there somewhere, and someone was looking for it, someone who would stop at nothing to get it. And time was running out. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across Tombstone as the stranger rode into town. His dark brown horse moved with a steady confidence that seemed out of place in a town held hostage by fear. He wore a light beige cowboy hat pulled low, a bright red bandana visible at his throat, and a dark gray vest over a light gray shirt. His eyes scanned the buildings, the people, the general sense of unease that clung to the streets like dust. He'd heard whispers as he approached, whispers about a family wronged, about documents stolen, about a man named Silas Crane who terrorized the town with impunity. The stranger had heard similar stories before, but this one felt different, more urgent. He found Doc Elmer's cabin on the edge of town, away from the main street where Silas's men patrolled. The doctor's small home was humble but well kept, with a light glowing in the window. The stranger dismounted, his boots making no sound on the packed earth. He tied his horse to the hitching post and approached the door. Inside he could hear voices, a woman's desperate pleas, a man's calm reassurances. The stranger stood outside, listening. He didn't knock. Not yet. He wanted to understand the situation first. The voices grew clearer. It was Arabella and her mother, with Doc Elmer trying to comfort them. The stranger heard Arabella mention the document, the original land grant, the one that could save her family, the one that had been stolen. He heard the fear in their voices, the despair. the sense of hopelessness that came when the law was corrupted and the powerful preyed on the weak. The stranger had seen it before, but he had also seen what happened when someone finally stood up to such men. He took a deep breath and knocked on the door. The sound was sharp in the quiet evening air. Footsteps approached. The door opened slightly. Doc Elmer peered out, his face etched with worry. "Yes?" the doctor asked, his eyes widening slightly as he took in the stranger's appearance. The stranger didn't speak immediately. He just stood there, his presence filling the small space. His gaze moved past the doctor to Arabella and her mother, huddled together in the corner of the room. Their faces were streaked with tears. Their clothes were dirty. Their eyes held a mixture of fear and defiance. "Arabella Blackwood?" the stranger finally asked, his voice calm and even. Doc Elmer hesitated, then nodded. "Who's asking?" The stranger ignored the question. His eyes remained fixed on Arabella. "I heard about your trouble," he said. "About the document." Arabella's eyes narrowed. "Who are you? What do you want?" The stranger didn't answer directly. Instead, he stepped inside, his movements deliberate and controlled. He closed the door behind him, shutting out the growing darkness. The small cabin suddenly felt crowded. The air was thick with the scent of herbs and fear. "I don't make promises," the stranger said, his voice still calm. "I don't offer hope. I don't pretend this will be easy." Arabella stared at him, confused. "Then why are you here?" The stranger's gaze swept across the room, taking in every detail. The worn furniture, the meager provisions, the desperation that clung to the Blackwood women like a shroud. Then his eyes returned to Arabella. "Where did you last see it?" he asked. The question was simple, direct, to the point. Arabella blinked. "See what?" "The document," the stranger said. "The original land grant. The one with the governor's signature." Arabella's breath caught. "How do you know about that?" "I know things," the stranger replied. "I know Silas Crane is looking for it. I know he'll stop at nothing to get it. I know he thinks it's the key to taking your land." Doc Elmer stepped forward. "Who are you? What do you want with this family?" The stranger finally turned his attention to the doctor. "I want to know where the document was last seen. That's all." Arabella shook her head. "It doesn't matter. It's gone. Edgar Thorne took it. He's working with Silas." The stranger nodded. "When was this?" "Yesterday," Arabella said. "My father went to confront him about the forged papers from the bank. Edgar Thorne met him with Silas's men. They took the document. They beat my father. Then they dragged him away." The stranger's expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened almost imperceptibly. "And your father, where is he now?" Arabella's mother let out a small sob. "Silas has him, in the jail. He's using him as leverage. He says he'll let my husband go if we produce the document, but we don't have it." The stranger was silent for a long moment. The only sounds in the small cabin were the woman's quiet sobs and the crackle of the fire in the stove. He seemed to be weighing something in his mind, calculating, assessing. "Where did your father see the document last?" the stranger asked again, his voice unchanged. Arabella looked at her mother, who shook her head. "We don't know. It was always kept in the family vault. Safe. Secure." The stranger turned to Doc Elmer. "You witnessed the signing. You were there when the governor presented it to her grandfather. Do you know where it might have been hidden?" Doc Elmer hesitated. "I know it was in the vault, but that's all." The stranger nodded. "And Edgar Thorne? Where would he have taken it after he took it from your father?" Arabella shrugged. "I don't know. He's Silas's lawyer. He would have given it to him, or hidden it somewhere safe." The stranger was silent again. His gaze swept across the room once more, taking in every detail. The fear in the women's eyes, the worry on the doctor's face, the meager furnishings of the cabin, the sense of hopelessness that hung in the air. Then he turned to leave. "Wait!" Arabella cried out. "Where are you going?" The paused at the door, his hand on the frame. He didn't look back. "I'm going to find what Silas is looking for," he said. "And when I do, I'm going to make sure he never hurts your family again." Then he was gone, leaving behind 3 people staring at the door he had just closed, wondering if the stranger was their salvation or just another man who would fail them. The stranger walked into the night. His horse waited patiently at the hitching post. He mounted without a word. The town slept around him, but he knew danger was awake. He rode toward the center of Tombstone, his eyes scanning every shadow, every movement. He stopped outside the law office. Edgar Thorne's name was painted on the glass. The lights were still on inside. The stranger dismounted again. He walked quietly to the window, peered inside. Edgar Thorne sat at his desk. Papers spread before him. A bottle of whiskey sat beside him. The stranger watched as Thorne poured himself another drink. Then he picked up a document, examined it closely. The stranger recognized the seal, the governor's signature, the original land grant. Thorne smiled, a cold, calculating smile. He placed the document in an envelope, sealed it. Then he wrote something on the front. The stranger couldn't make out the words from his position. The stranger moved to the side of the building, found a small window, peered inside again. Thorne was now on the telephone, his voice low but urgent. The stranger couldn't hear the words, but he could see the fear in Thorne's eyes, the way he kept glancing at the door. Thorne ended the call. He stood up, paced the room, his hands shaking slightly. Then he stopped, looked directly at the window where the stranger stood. The stranger froze. Thorne knew he was there, had seen him in the reflection, or sensed his presence. The stranger backed away silently, retreated into the shadows. He heard the window slide open behind him. "Who's there?" Thorne's voice called out. "I know you're there." The stranger didn't answer. He melted into the darkness, moving quickly but quietly. He heard footsteps behind him, fast, purposeful. Someone was following him now. He turned down an alley, narrow and dark, the smell of garbage and something else, something metallic. He quickened his pace. The footsteps kept pace behind him. Closer now. He reached the end of the alley, turned right, into a wider street. The footsteps stopped. The stranger risked a glance back. No one there. But he knew they were there. Watching, waiting. He continued on, his mind racing. Thorne had the document. He had called someone powerful, the sheriff, most likely. The stranger had to find out what they planned. He had to stop them. He walked toward the sheriff's office. The lights were on inside. Through the window he could see Sheriff Tom Weston talking to someone. The stranger couldn't see who, but he could see the money on the desk, stack of bills. The sheriff was taking it, greasing his palms. The stranger watched as the sheriff pocketed the money, shook hands with the person beside him. Then the person turned. It was Edgar Thorne. The 2 men exchanged a few more words. Then Thorne left. The sheriff remained at his desk, counting the money. The stranger knew he had to get inside, had to find out what they planned. But how? He moved to the back of the building, found a window slightly ajar, slipped inside quietly. The sheriff's office was small, desk in the center, wanted posters on the walls, guns on the wall. The stranger searched quietly, behind the desk, in the drawers. Nothing. Then he heard footsteps approaching, the front door opening. The stranger froze. Behind a filing cabinet, heart pounding. The sheriff walked in, stopped, sniffed the air. Someone was here. He drew his pistol. "Who's there?" he called out. "I know you're in here." The stranger didn't move, didn't breathe. The sheriff moved closer, closer to where the stranger hid, then stopped, right beside the filing cabinet. The stranger could feel the heat of the man's body, smell the whiskey on his breath. Then the sheriff turned away, walked to his desk, sat down. The stranger remained hidden, waiting, watching. The sheriff picked up a document, looked at it, then placed it in a drawer, locked it. The stranger knew what it was, the original document, the one that could save Arabella's family, the one Silas Crane wanted so badly. The stranger had to get it. But how? The sheriff was between him and the desk, and the window he came in through was now too risky. He was trapped, and time was running out. The stranger remained perfectly still behind the filing cabinet. His heart pounded against his ribs, but his breathing was controlled, silent. He watched as the sheriff sat at his desk, counting the money he'd just received from Edgar Thorne. The document was in that locked drawer. The key was on the sheriff's belt. The stranger calculated the distance. Too far, too risky. The sheriff finished counting, stuffed the bills into a drawer, then he stood up, walked to the water cooler, filled a glass, drank it. The stranger knew this was his chance. While the sheriff's back was turned, he moved silently, like a shadow. Across the office, behind the sheriff. His hand reached for the key on the belt. The sheriff turned suddenly, almost as if he sensed something was wrong. "Who's there?" the sheriff called out, hand going to his pistol. The stranger reacted faster. His hand closed around the key. He stepped back into the shadows. The sheriff fired. The bullet ricocheted off the filing cabinet. The stranger was already moving. Out the window, into the night, he ran, down alleyways, through back streets, away from the sheriff's office, away from the danger. But he knew they would come for him. Silas Crane's men, Thorne's men, the sheriff's men. They would hunt him down. He ducked into a narrow alley between two buildings. The smell of garbage and something else, something metallic. Blood. He couldn't tell. He leaned against the wall, catching his breath. The key was still in his hand. The document was still in the sheriff's office. But he had a plan. Then he heard footsteps, coming from the alley entrance. Heavy footsteps, purposeful. More than one person. The stranger straightened up, prepared to fight. 3 men emerged from the darkness, led by a man with a scar across his face, one of Silas Crane's lieutenants. "Well, well," the scarred man said. "What have we here? The nosy stranger who's been asking questions." The stranger didn't answer. He just watched them, his hand resting on the butt of his pistol. "The boss wants you gone," the scarred man continued, "permanently, and he wants that key you stole." The stranger's fingers tightened around the key. "The document belongs to the Blackwood family," he said, "not to Silas Crane." The scarred man laughed. "The Blackwood family, they're finished, just like you will be when we're done with you." One of the other men drew his pistol. "Let's get this over with." The stranger moved faster than they expected. He dove to the side. Gunfire erupted. Bullets slammed into the wall where he'd been standing. He rolled behind a pile of crates, pulled his own pistol, fired back. One of the men cried out, fell to the ground. The other 2 scattered, seeking cover. The stranger used the distraction to scramble to his feet, ran deeper into the alley. They pursued him, cornered him at a dead end, a brick wall on one side, a high fence on the other. No escape. "Nowhere to run, stranger," the scarred man called out. "Nowhere to hide." The stranger knew they were right. He was trapped, outnumbered, outgunned. But he wasn't finished yet. Not by a long shot. He raised his pistol, fired at the lock on the fence. It didn't break. He fired again. Still nothing. The men were advancing now, their pistols drawn, ready to end it. The stranger made his decision. He charged forward, not at them, but at the wall beside the fence. He kicked at a loose brick. It gave way. Behind it was a narrow opening, just big enough for a man to squeeze through. He dove through, ignoring the pain as his shoulder scraped against the rough edges. He was in another alley. Darker, narrower. He ran, didn't look back. He heard shouts behind him, the sound of breaking bricks. They were coming after him. He had to keep moving, had to find a place to hide, had to figure out his next move. He ducked into a doorway, pressed himself against the wall, listened. The footsteps grew closer, then faded. They had lost him. For now. He leaned against the wall, catching his breath. His shoulder throbbed where he'd scraped it against the brick. His hands were shaking. But he was alive, and he still had the key. He looked at it in his hand, the small piece of metal that could unlock the truth, that could save Arabella's family, that could bring down Silas Crane and his corrupt allies. The ambush had changed things. They had tried to kill him, failed. Now it was personal. The stranger had faced many dangerous men in his life, but none as ruthless as Silas Crane, none as determined to destroy innocent lives for their own gain. He straightened up, pushed himself away from the wall. He had a plan now, a risky one. But it might work. He needed allies, people who were willing to stand up to Silas Crane, people who had nothing left to lose. He thought of Doc Elmer, the doctor who had witnessed the original signing. He might know something. He might be willing to help. And there was Caleb Marlowe, the bank teller. If the document wasn't in the sheriff's office, where else could it be? The bank. Marlowe would know. The stranger moved through the shadows, toward Doc Elmer's cabin, toward the bank, toward the truth, and toward Silas Crane. He would find the document. He would expose the corruption. He would make sure justice was served, no matter what the cost. The stranger moved through the shadows of Tombstone, his shoulder throbbing from the narrow escape. The alley behind him was silent now, but he knew Silas's men would be regrouping. He had to move quickly. Doc Elmer's cabin was his first stop. The doctor might have information about Caleb Marlowe, the bank teller who could hold the key to everything. The cabin was dark when he arrived. No light in the windows, no smoke from the chimney. The stranger knocked softly. No answer. He tried again, louder this time. Still nothing. He circled the cabin, peering through windows. Empty. Doc Elmer was gone. The stranger's jaw tightened. Something was wrong. He turned toward the bank, the last place the document could be hidden. The bank was a 2-story building of stone and wood, with tall windows that reflected the moonlight. The stranger approached cautiously, scanning the street for any sign of Silas's men. The bank was closed, but lights burned in the upper windows. The stranger moved to the side, where a narrow alley ran beside the building. He slipped inside, his boots making no sound on the polished floor. The bank was deserted, except for one man. Caleb Marlowe. The bank teller sat at his desk, his face pale, his hands trembling as he shuffled papers. The stranger stepped out of the shadows. Marlowe jumped, scattering papers across the floor. Who's there?" he stammered, his eyes wide with fear. The stranger didn't answer. He just watched the man, his presence filling the small office. Marlowe recognized the red bandana, the calm demeanor, the dangerous stillness. "It's you," Marlowe whispered. "The stranger. I've heard about you. What do you want?" "The document," the stranger said. "The original land grant, the one with the governor's signature." Marlowe's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." The stranger took a step forward, Don't lie to me. I know you have it. I know Silas threatened you, threatened your family. Marlowe slumped in his chair. You know too much, he said, his voice barely audible. Too much for your own good. The stranger moved closer. I can help you. I can protect you. But I need your help first. Marlowe shook his head. There's no helping me. Silas owns this town, the sheriff, the judge. They're all in his pocket. The stranger reached into his pocket, pulled out a small object. A locket. He held it out. Marlowe's eyes widened. Where did you get that? From your wife, the stranger said. She gave it to me, said you'd know what it meant. Marlowe stared at the locket. His hands trembled. You've been to my house. You've talked to my wife. She's afraid, the stranger said. But she's also brave. She said you were brave too, once. Marlowe closed his eyes. A single tear escaped. What do you want from me? The document, the stranger said again. I need you to give it to me. Tonight. Marlowe shook his head. I can't. If Silas finds out I helped you... He won't find out, the stranger said. Not if we're careful. Not if you do exactly as I say. Marlowe hesitated, looked at the locket in the stranger's hand, looked at the door, listened for any sound outside. Then he nodded slowly. Follow me. He stood up, walked to a heavy door at the back of the office, unlocked it with a key from his pocket. The stranger followed him down a narrow flight of stairs, to a small room lined with safes. This is where we keep the valuables, Marlowe said. The important documents, the ones that can't be replaced. He stopped before one of the safes, turned the dial. The heavy door swung open. Inside, wrapped in cloth, was the document. The original land grant. The governor's signature clear as day. Marlowe reached for it, his hand shaking. I've been hiding it here for weeks, ever since Silas threatened me. The stranger stepped forward. Give it to me. Marlowe hesitated. What if I do? What if I help you? What happens to my family? The stranger looked at the terrified man, then at the document in his hand. Justice happens, he said. That's all. Justice. He took the document, wrapped it carefully. Then he turned to leave, but Marlowe caught his arm. Wait, he said. There's something else you should know. The stranger paused. What? Silas knows you're coming, Marlowe said. He's waiting for you at the bank, with men, with guns. He plans to ambush you. The stranger's eyes narrowed. When? Tonight, Marlowe said. As soon as the moon is highest. He thinks that's when you'll come for the document. The stranger nodded. Thank you for your help, Caleb. He turned to leave, but Marlowe stopped him again. What about my family? What happens to them if Silas finds out I helped you? The stranger looked back. They'll be safe, because Silas Crane won't be a problem anymore. Then he was gone, leaving Marlowe alone in the vault, with the knowledge that he had just helped bring down the most powerful man in Tombstone, and with the hope that his family would be safe. For the first time in a long time. The stranger moved through the shadows of Tombstone, the document tucked safely inside his vest. The moon was high now, casting long shadows across the deserted streets. Every step echoed in the silence. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. Not now. The bank loomed ahead. Lights still burned in the windows. Silas and his men were waiting. He could feel it. The air was thick with anticipation, with danger. He approached from the rear, the alley where he'd first entered the bank, the same narrow passage between stone walls. He paused at the corner, listened, heard voices, men talking, laughing, the sound of metal scraping against wood, guns being checked. He peered around the corner, saw them, Silas Crane and 3 of his men, positioned at the front entrance, guns drawn, ready. They had the bank surrounded. No one was getting in or out without them knowing. Silas stood in the center, his face illuminated by the lantern light. A cruel smile played on his lips. He was enjoying this, the power, the control, the fear he inspired. "They'll come," one of the men said. "He'll come for the document." Silas nodded. "Oh, he'll come. And when he does, we'll be ready. No more Mr. Nice Stranger. This time, we end it." The stranger watched, calculated, assessed. 4 men, armed, ready for a fight. But they were expecting someone approaching from the street, not from the rear, not from the shadows. He moved silently, like a cat, through the alley to the back door. It was unlocked, left that way on purpose. A trap. But it was his trap now. He pushed the door open, stepped inside. The sound of the hinges creaking seemed loud in the quiet bank. The men in the front office turned, surprised, confused. Their guns wavered for a second, too late. The stranger moved fast, his hand on his pistol. He fired once, twice. The shots echoed through the small space. 2 men went down, screaming, crying out in pain. The other 2 turned, raised their weapons, but the stranger was already moving. Behind the counter, cover. Bullets slammed into the wood, splinters flew, dust filled the air. "Come out, stranger!" Silas's voice boomed from the front office. "I know you're in there. You can't hide forever." The stranger didn't answer. He listened, heard movement. Silas was coming. Through the front office, into the main bank area, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. The stranger peeked over the counter, saw Silas, saw the determination in his eyes, the hatred, the fear masked as anger. "You should have stayed out of this," Silas said, his pistol aimed at the counter. "This wasn't your fight." The stranger stood up, slowly, deliberately, his hand away from his weapon. "It is when innocent people suffer," he said, his voice calm, even. "When men like you prey on the weak." Silas laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Innocent? Your friend Caleb Marlowe? He's as guilty as I am, just smarter about hiding it." The stranger didn't flinch. "He's a family man, not a bully like you." Silas's face darkened. "Enough talk. Give me the document, and maybe I'll let you walk out of here." The stranger shook his head. "No." "Then die," Silas said. He raised his pistol, finger tightening on the trigger. The stranger moved faster. His hand flashed to his holster. The gunshot echoed through the bank. But it wasn't Silas who fell. It was the stranger who stood tall, the document clutched in his hand, the proof of Arabella's family's ownership, the key to bringing down Silas Crane and his corrupt allies. The stranger looked at Silas, at the fear in his eyes, the realization that he'd been outmatched, outsmarted. "Stop this madness," the stranger said, his voice calm, final. "Your reign of terror ends tonight." The stranger stood tall in the bank, the document clutched in his hand. Silas Crane's eyes widened with recognition, then narrowed with hatred. "You think that piece of paper changes anything?" Silas sneered, his hand still on his pistol. The stranger didn't flinch. "It changes everything," he said calmly. "This is the original land grant, signed by the governor himself, not the forgery Edgar Thorne created." Silas's face paled. "You're bluffing." The stranger stepped forward. "Doc Elmer witnessed the signing. He can attest to its authenticity, and Caleb Marlowe here can confirm it's been in the bank vault all along, safe from your threats." At the mention of his name, Caleb Marlowe stepped forward from where he'd been hiding behind a desk. "It's true," he said, his voice gaining strength. "I've been hiding it for weeks, ever since Silas threatened to harm my family if I didn't cooperate." Silas's men, who had been recovering from the earlier gunshot, now looked uncertain. Their leader was cornered, outmatched. "What about the sheriff?" one of them asked. "He said he had the document." The stranger shook his head. "The sheriff never had it. He was paid to look the other way while Edgar Thorne forged the replacement document. The real document was here all along." As if on cue, Sheriff Tom Weston entered the bank, his hand on his pistol. "What's all this commotion?" he demanded, then stopped when he saw the document in the stranger's hand. "The real document, Sheriff," the stranger said. "The one that proves Arabella Blackwood's family owns this land. The one you've been ignoring while collecting Silas's bribes." The sheriff's face went pale. "I can explain." "No need," the stranger said. "Your explanation will be for the judge, along with Silas and Edgar Thorne." Suddenly Doc Elmer entered the bank, followed by Arabella and her mother. Their faces streaked with tears, but their eyes filled with hope. "Is it true?" Arabella asked, her voice trembling. "Do we have our land back?" The stranger held out the document. "Your family's land is yours," he said, "and Silas Crane's reign of terror is over." Silas lunged for his pistol, but the stranger was faster. He disarmed Silas with a swift movement of his hand. "Not this time," he said. "The madness stops now." Over the next hour, the stranger oversaw the arrest of Silas, Edgar Thorne, and Sheriff Tom Weston. Arabella's father was released from jail. The false claim on the land was officially dismissed. The Blackwood family's ownership was restored. As dawn broke over Tombstone, the stranger stood at the edge of town. Arabella approached him. "How can we ever thank you?" she asked. The stranger shook his head. "No thanks needed. Just live on your land with honor." He turned to leave, but Arabella called out, "What's your name?" The stranger paused. Without looking back, he said, "Names aren't important. Justice is." Then he mounted his horse and rode west, leaving behind a town that had been changed forever. A town where justice had been served, not because of the law, but because one man refused to look away. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Your support is what brings these stories to more people.